Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the Buzz Live, BeeWare's monthly community call. Counting will continue until I get bored with it. This is the time when the core team and the community come together to discuss everything BeeWare. For those who haven't seen BeeWare before, it's a collection of tools and libraries for writing cross-platform GUI applications in Python, including desktop applications for macOS, Windows, and Linux, mobile applications for Android and iOS, and single-page web apps. As a quick overview, we'll begin with core team introductions, followed by state of the hive and where we need help. After that, it's waggle dance time, followed by down the bee burrow. We'd like to acknowledge that many of us on this call today are speaking from the lands of First Nations. We'd like to recognize the continuing connection of the people of those First Nations to their lands, waters, and culture, and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kattni, and I'm speaking from the lands of the Bodéwadmi. Also known as Southeast Michigan, US. My involvement in BeeWare is mostly around developer relations. I focus primarily on building the community, writing documentation, and improving the experience for those who find the project. Now I'll let each of the folks on the core team introduce themselves. Russell?
Hey, I'm Russell Keith-Magee. I am speaking from Whadjuk Noongar boodja, otherwise known as Perth, Western Australia. I am the founder of the BeeWare project, benevolent dictator for now, and have a long history in the Python ecosystem, starting 20-something years ago on the Django core team. Charles?
Hey there, I'm Charles. I'm based in Baltimore, which is on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, and I work pretty much exclusively on Toga, on the graphical toolkit for BeeWare, and I guess that's about me.
All right, Philip?
Hi, I'm Philip James, also known as Fellini across the internet, and I'm speaking from traditional Ohlone lands, also known as the East Bay area of California.
All right, thanks everyone. We'd also like to recognize BeeWare's financial sponsors, our gold sponsor Anaconda, and our individual financial sponsors. If you'd like to support the work of the BeeWare project, visit beeware.org/membership. Next up is State of the Hive. This is your monthly BeeWare by the numbers update. Overall, across the entire BeeWare project, we merged 294 PRs from 18 authors. We'd like to recognize this month's community contributors. Take it away, Russell.
So yes, a very big thank you this month to Abdo, Am-Monteiro, gmkeebiy, haikesan, Haya Asif, John, who's on the call with us today, KBS, Kevin Turcios, Labib Bin Salam, Libre, Matt Van Hoen, Olivia Leigh, Sai Asish, and Yousuf Khan. Thank you all very much for all your contributions over the last month.
Excellent. So the two primary projects in the BeeWare suite are Briefcase and Toga. We're going to talk about those. This month on Briefcase, we merged 45 PRs from 9 authors. Russell, if you'd like to talk about Briefcase's notable new features.
Absolutely. So this month we've seen the first in release of Briefcase 043, and just because one release wasn't enough, we decided to follow that up with 044. This one's a little bit embarrassing. We did have a series of releases this month, and they did not go well. We released 043 of Briefcase. We'll also talk about release Toga, and we released Rubicon. It turns out we found out the day after we released Briefcase 043 that the latest release of Briefcase and the latest release of Toga were actually mutually incompatible because of a change that got introduced into Toga but wasn't reflected in a template guide in Briefcase. And so there was a whole conflict of one was being tested on the old version when they got at the time of the release. And so yeah, we had to resolve all those issues. I'll get to the details of that in the Toga discussion. However, along the way, that sort of update reflects sort of 2 months worth of updates in the Briefcase project. In the last month, we landed a number of fairly significant features. One of them I'm going to hand off to Kattni because she was the person who actually built them all. Some improvements in the notarization and CI environments. Kattni, you want to describe what you did?
Yeah, so this all came out of me building a tiny, silly app that shows you what current day is in COVID time, so March 2217, 2020, or whatever it is at this point. And I tried to send it to you, Russ, and you pointed out that because it wasn't notarized and signed, you couldn't actually use it on your computer. And I said, well, can you do that in CI? And you said, So my answer to that was to figure out how to do that. So along the way, I added an auto resume feature, which enables Briefcase package to automatically resume the notarization process when run after the process is interrupted. As this only applies to macOS, some changes were needed to ensure the feature could be used in CI when all platforms were involved. I added a no wait flag to the notarization process to allow for submitting the app for notarization without waiting for completion. This process can take several hours, and it would otherwise time out after 2 hours in CI and require a manual rerun. And so adding these two features gave us a way to write a CI workflow that will produce a fully notarized release artifact. And that is how that works out. It'll be documented on Briefcase eventually, is currently on a private repo, but it is now possible to do. Thanks.
Sure, actually, the feature is available. It's just not documented as to how. Here's the nicely documented. This is how to use it in your workflow. It's mostly just so we don't tie up CI workers, because macOS takes some time to notarize applications, and it's a completely opaque process that sometimes takes 5 minutes and sometimes takes hours. So yeah, hopefully this will clean up that process. You will still need to rerun the workflow, but it's well, for most cases you'll need to rerun the workflow, but it'll be run and it will fail immediately rather than run and block a CI worker for 2 hours. Also this month, the changes we saw this month, we had an initial refactor of virtual environment handling. This is part of a larger body of work that I've been tinkering with for a couple of weeks now, and hopefully we'll see the actual, the meat of this in the near future. What this essentially means is that Briefcase currently uses Python's built-in virtual environments for everything, which is great. They're fine, but there are people in this world that don't use Python's built-in virtual environments, most notably people who use UV and people who use Conda. And we're hoping that in the very near future, you will be able to create, or you'll be able to use UV or Conda environments to build the rest of your application. I've got UV mostly working, or UV working for desktop applications. I've got Conda working for macOS applications, Windows applications under certain circumstances, just finessing the details out right now. Hopefully, this will all be in the next release of Briefcase. We are looking to move to a regular 2-month, pushing out releases every 2-month cadence. So hopefully in the next couple of months, you'll start to see that and you'll be able to play around with Conda and UV-based environments. We also, this release and in the last month, we landed a bunch of improvements to macOS log handling. I mentioned this in the call last month because there was some upstream things we needed to do. The CPython changes, the changes in CPython landed last month. This month, we got the corresponding changes in Briefcase itself. This effectively means that as of Python 3.14, a macOS application doesn't require any special additional packages to be able to see the logs. And when you're running on Python, running on macOS 26, you will actually be able to see all of the logs that your application is presenting for a while there, or until this most recent release. If you ran a macOS application on macOS 26, you would see private written every time it wrote something to the logs, which is accurate but not helpful. So yeah, that's the updates from Briefcase over the last month.
Thanks. This month on Toga, we merged 79 PRs from 7 authors, and Russell will now cover Toga's new features.
Yes. Okay. So again, we had 2 releases. We released Toga 0.45, and then in rapid succession released Toga 0.46. This essentially is the other half of the Briefcase problem. I think I mentioned it in last month's call, we landed a change in the way that GTK's event loop is handled, which is necessary because of changes that are coming in Python 3.15. The little detail we missed is that when we made that change, we also implicitly introduced a dependency on a minimum version of PyGObject. And PyGObject is in turn dependent upon libgi repository, which is a system-provided library to actually integrate with the GTK libraries. And PyGObject 352.1 changed the version of libgobject that it depends on. And the problem is that libgobject 2 is available on all currently maintained Linux distributions except Debian 12 and Ubuntu 22.04. When we rolled this out a year ago, we kind of ended up in a weird situation because Debian 12 was still the stable Debian release that was available, and so we had to work out a way to support both libgobject 1 and libgi repository 1 and libgi repository 2. And allow you to opt into the new version if you wanted to. As a result of this change to the event loop, supporting libgr repository 1 is essentially no longer an option because we need a more recent version of libgobject, and we can't support Python 3.15 and Debian 12 at the same time as a result of that. So what we've essentially said to do, or what we've decided to do, is officially deprecate Debian 12 and Ubuntu 22.04. Debian 12 reaches its end of supported life in, I think, about 4 days, so it's effectively end of life anyway. Ubuntu 22.04 would have been end of life in, I think, like July next year, so about 12 months away. There are now 2 stable Ubuntu releases. Debian 13 is available, so there is a migration path for people who are on Linux and want to be able to move to a stable LTS supported version. And so we figured that was rather than try and maintain a complicated backwards compatibility shim, we figured that was the easiest way to go. Another really big change that I'm very excited about, we had one of the contributions from Oliver Leigh was a major improvement to the WinForms event loop. WinForms, or Windows in general, works slightly different to Unix in the way that it handles async IO support. It uses this thing called a proactor, which essentially requires a polling-based mechanism to pull new events out of an event queue. Which is great, except that you then need to have this polling mechanism, and the speed at which you do the poll constrains how fast the async IO event loop runs. So if you did something, the way this would manifest, if you did something like use HTTPX to download asynchronously a large file, you could download a 10 megabyte file in 20 seconds or whatever if it was running on macOS, exactly the same download on exactly the same hardware running on Windows would take 3 minutes because every chunk was essentially being separated by a 5 millisecond gap, which was the speed of the polling mechanism. Oliver's been able to work out how to remove that polling and make the polling mechanism be triggered by the IOCP internal system call. So when a network event happens, poll the event loop, process the next event, which means that there's no more delays. The downloads of or network events are processed as fast as they happen on Windows rather than being delayed. We also saw the introduction just yesterday of a full testing backend for our textual backend. So you can now run Toga's full test suite on textual. That doesn't mean all the widgets are there yet. There are still a lot of gaps that need to be filled out in their widgets, but it does now mean that you can easily, we now have a basis for saying textual is adhering to what Toga's API contract is. So that this is kind of the thing that unlocks us actually making the textual backend a fully fledged, fully compliant backend. If you are looking for a place to contribute, adding the test probes for the textual backend is now a place that you can contribute. Thanks to cleaning up some work that John, who's on the call, did a couple of months ago, but he's sort of finally closed the last little loop here. We added system PySide 6 support. If you're building a Linux app using the Qt backend, you sort of have 2 options. You can install Qt or PySide 6 as a system package. I use your operating system's provided version of system PySide 6, or you can install it with PyPI. If you install the version from PyPI, that's the sort of easiest version to do, but it does mean that you lose things like integration with system themes, and so there's a conflict there. So now you can essentially say install the Toga Qt backend, but use the system bindings, and it will connect to the system bindings. And lastly, there's a bunch of improvements over the last month to the Canvas widget. I'm going to hand off to Charles here as the master of all things Canvas.
I don't know about master, but I guess I have rewritten at least half of it at this point. So yeah, there's been a couple of bug fixes, a couple of additions. First of all, fixed a bug with the reset transform, which it's supposed to reset any of the geometric transforms you've applied, and it worked everywhere except on macOS and iOS, where it did reset the transform, but it also reset the whole drawing context and all of its attributes. So I got that fixed. Fixed a bug with the color alias that you can, when you're using a fill or a stroke, instead of stroke style or fill style, you can say color instead if you want. And there was a bug that sometimes happened depending on how that was specified. And then as far as the actual like design of the API itself, the last remaining bit we had that was like different than the HTML canvas was we had a write text method that had to be inside either a fill or a stroke context in order to do that. And so that's now been replaced with a fill text and a stroke text method. It should match how the Canvas one HTML canvas works. We still have plenty of things to add, but that should be the last part that was present and different, basically. And then beyond that, we've added a couple features to our sort of Pythonic conveniences on top of the HTML API, where you can now, the transforms can be context managers. So if you want to apply like a scale and do some stuff and then undo the scale, if you can do that as a context manager. So you can with scale, blah, 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 and then inside that block, you'll have the transform applied. And then the state context manager, if you just use it bare, all it is it just saves state and restores. So you can set fill style or whatever you want inside it, and then it'll set back. It now has keyword parameters. So all of the context attributes we currently support, and as we go forward, the more and more that we add, you can supply all those as keyword arguments to state, and then they'll be set upon saving the context. And then the last thing, it's not exactly a feature, but like the main API of the Canvas widget is our reconstruction, basically, of the HTML canvas with a couple of features on top. There is a layer that underpins that underneath where there are objects that record all the drawing instructions, and that's how it works under the hood, and it's there if you want to reach into it yourself, but it's kind of not the main way. And when you start interacting with it, sometimes things are unintuitive. So I tried to make the documentation clearer about like, hey, this is here if you want, but please don't think this is the normal way and go into it blind and start being confused. So I think that's about it on Canvas.
All right, thanks. So this month across the rest of the BeeWare project, we merged 170 PRs from 10 authors, and there have been some notable updates here as well. Russell?
Again, yes, we had a Rubicon release 055 and then followed it right up with 056. Again, this was unrelated to the Briefcase and Toga change, but it does relate to the one notable feature that is in this latest version of Rubicon. So what we added in the last version of Rubicon, we made a modification to the way the event loop shuts down. Essentially, someone reported that the shutting down the event loop actually terminated the application, like fully stopped the application, which for most applications is what you want. But if you're doing a sort of a situation where the event loop is running and you want to stop it, do something else before the application ends, it's not what you want to do. So we made a modification to handle that, but the way that we did it ended up with a very weird situation because of an oddity of the way macOS applications run. The macOS application, when you say stop this application, it's not a stop and it actually stops. It is a request to stop, which is processed when the event loop then processes the next event. But if you are shutting down the event loop, you end up posting the stop the application event and then never process the stop the application event, and so the application ends up stalling out until the next event actually happens, which could be something like you move the mouse over the window and then the application disappears, which is more than a little surprising. And it would only trigger in some situations, like you needed to be triggering the event or triggering the app exit event from a coroutine or on a timer or things like that. Anyway, so we corrected that, we fixed that problem, but we managed to fix it in such a way that it broke iOS because it was depending upon a symbol that exists on macOS but doesn't exist on iOS, and for historical reasons we didn't actually run the Rubicon test suite on iOS. So another quick update, push out another 056 release, and we have it working on both iOS and macOS. We also saw some updates to the Briefcase Windows templates. We can now a common feature of Windows installers is a little checkbox saying, do you want me to create a desktop shortcut for this application? Personally, I always check that off, so I've never been particularly inspired by or never been particularly enthralled by that feature. But it now exists, and it's an option that you can turn on. You can have that feature there. And we've also, thanks to a community contribution, we've now got post-install script handling on macOS. We added post-install script handling on Windows in the last Briefcase release, I think it was. And so now we've now got that corresponding fix for macOS as well. We don't have post-uninstall scripts because macOS PKG installers don't provide uninstall scripts. And we also, it also only works on PKG installers, not app and DMG installers, because apps and DMGs are essentially just, here's a bundle, they're not an installer per se. So if you want that functionality, you have to package your application as a PKG, but if you do, the option is now there. And that is everything else that was notable over the last month.
Excellent. And that's State of the Hive. Next up, where we need help. We're always looking for people to contribute to BeeWare, but sometimes it's hard to know where help is needed most. This month, we're looking for help with CI, and our issue of the month is on Briefcase. Russell, if you'd like to elaborate.
Sure. So this is actually something that came out of the work that Kattni was doing in this packaging process. So one of the sort of series of smaller PRs that she put together was related to the ability to resume and what needs to be present in order to resume a packaging run. So when you package, when you're doing a notarization pass, you're essentially saying, okay, build the full application, build a DMG installer, for example, and then submit that DMG for notarization. It literally gets sent to Apple. Apple does whatever magic they do behind the scenes, and they record the hash of that DMG and send the result back to you, and you staple the result back onto the DMG. Now, in order to resume DMG packaging, all you need is a copy of the DMG. And so you do a Briefcase package, it produces the DMG file in the dist folder. As long as you're saving the contents of the dist folder, there you go, it's all done. You've got a DMG there. Same is true of a PKG installer as well. But app installers are slightly different because an app installer, a macOS app, is actually just a directory of files. And so you can't send a directory of files. You have to zip the .app bundle, send the zip file to Apple, and then they tell you what to staple, and you staple it onto the original .app. And so historically what has happened is that Briefcase says, okay, well, we're going to create a temporary zip in the build folder, send the zip, and then staple it, and only when you do the staple does it produce the artifact in the dist folder. That works fine. The problem is that if you need to resume later on, you actually need to have the contents of the build folder as well as the dist folder in order to be able to resume the signing of a .app folder, of a notarization of an app. So what Briefcase 2889 is saying is essentially removing that that differentiation and saying, okay, what we're going to do is say, as a temporary artifact, produce the .zip file in the dist folder. Like, don't try and do it in the build folder. Do it in the dist folder. Send it off to Apple, get the notarization back, then delete the zip folder because we no longer need that zip, or at least delete it as a temporary artifact and then recreate it as the fully notarized version. But as long as that temporary version is there, all you need to archive as part of a CI process is save the contents of the dist folder and then on a subsequent run, restore the contents of just the dist folder. So it's essentially a subtle change to where the artifacts are being built for the purposes of an app build. Details are on that ticket. The other one that I wanted to flag there is essentially the CI things that will stop us from messing up the way that we've messed up in this previous release. There are essentially two CI tasks that we really need to add. We can avoid them if we step carefully. We can avoid the problem that we saw with Briefcase and Toga by essentially releasing Rubicon and then releasing Toga and then releasing Briefcase rather than trying to release them all at the same time, which is what I did last Wednesday when I did the releases. But realistically, what we want to be doing is on Rubicon, we want to run Rubicon CI on iOS, and we have the capability to do that now because we now have built it, like the CI build wheel is able to build wheels, and we have the test bed is able to build test beds, and Briefcase is able to run test suites as well. There are a few things that need to be tuned and tweaked around that because we need to be able to tell Rubicon when you're testing, you actually need to use this pre-release version of the Rubicon wheel, not the one that you find up in the cloud. And on Toga, we need to essentially run a test that can we actually launch an application. We don't need anything to be fancy. We just need to launch an application. We need to start an application, again, with the pre-release versions of the Rubicon wheel, or the pre-release versions of the Toga wheels. With the version of Toga we've just built, can we use the stock version of an installed version of Briefcase to install this version of Toga? And that, if we'd had that in place, that would have caught the issue when we introduced the PyG object change, because all of a sudden, oh, hang on, we can't use the stable version of Briefcase and the current version of Toga. So if you are interested in learning how CI works or how to play around with CI, those are two areas that we need some help.
Thanks. Are you interested in contributing? You can find all the issues that are ready to be picked up at beeware.org/BEE/ready. And that's where we need help. Next up, it's waggle dance time. When worker bees find a good source of pollen and return to the hive, they do a waggle dance to tell the rest of the bees where to find the good stuff. So here's the BeeWare community waggle dance, all the cool stuff that's been happening in the BeeWare community. I'll start, and then I will call on other folks to go ahead and provide their updates. If you're text only, I will read your notes for you. As I mentioned earlier, I shipped 3 new features to Briefcase around macOS notarization and CI. I also solved the long-standing issue with signing and notarizing apps in CI, which is currently on a personal repo but will eventually be documented in Briefcase. Windows apps require signing to avoid showing a download from the internet warning when opened, and macOS apps require signing to be able to run on any other machine other than the one it was built on, and notarization stops the untrusted developer warning when installing. There has so far not been a CI workflow, including the processes to produce signed and notarized release artifacts. It requires a signing certificate for Windows apps and an Apple developer account for macOS apps, both of which have a cost, but with those in place, it works quite well. I migrated the documentation for Podium and Toga chart to Sphinx, from Sphinx to MakeDocs, as well as finishing up adding more documentation to Podium. And I forgot to mention last month, I updated the MakeDocs macros plugin to allow for multiple target content directories, which was required to be able to properly display our collapsed content in our documentation. As the macros plugin itself is currently in maintenance mode upstream, we are working off a branch in my fork. Next up is Russell.
Yes, so for most of the last month, I have been elbow deep in Briefcase trying to get virtual environments working. It is one of these things that from the outside will make absolutely no difference to how anything operates, but opens up a bunch of additional features. So it's kind of getting the architecture right for what a virtual environment is and how it is activated in the context of Briefcase is sort of a design thing that I've been bouncing back and forth on. How do we do it? When do we do it? Where do we enter into the virtual environment? What is entering a virtual environment, and so on? And making sure that the set of features that I'm adding is sufficient to support the needs of, in particular, UV and Conda. I have also done a little bit of work with Pixie, which is kind of UV for the Conda ecosystem. I probably won't end up landing the Pixie stuff in the short term, mostly because Pixie has some interesting sort of very, very strong opinions about how ecosystems or how you build ecosystems. Not saying that they're wrong, it's just finding the right mapping of what the way that Pixie envisages environments working and Briefcase's concept of environments. And in particular, Briefcase doesn't currently have a very strong concept of file locking or dependency locking, which is another feature that has been requested and will become a lot easier with all these virtual environment stuff, but it's not something I'm trying to tackle right here. So most of what I've been doing for the last month has been in that territory when I'm not maintaining everything else that's going on in the BeeWare ecosystem. So that is slowly moving forward. I'm hoping in the next few days there will be some tangible version of that will be reviewed and be merged upstream. The other piece that I've been playing around with is varieties of wheels that are binary dependencies that I'm just trying to satisfy myself that we actually have the tools we need in place. The biggest of those is NumPy. I have been trying to land a pull request in NumPy for over a year at this point. The problem is that NumPy has a lot of downstream dependencies, all of which then need to be iOS dependent or iOS compatible. I last had a look at this back in April and made a bunch of changes, and got everything ready, pushed it up for review, and then within about 3 days, they completely changed the version of Meson that they were using, and I needed to go through and do another round of revisions in the last month to get that up to date. So I'm, again, currently waiting on a review of one pull request, and then that will allow me to push up the pull request for NumPy. So don't know when that will land, but we are actually able to publish NumPy 2.5 wheels, and they are up on the BeeWare repository, the BeeWare package repository for use on iOS. I've also, in the last couple of days, I've also been just tinkering in the background. I have done at various times a demo of Toga Chart, which uses Matplotlib to draw charts on an iOS and macOS context, using the Canvas widget that Charles was talking about earlier. That Matplotlib is a binary dependency. It has a binary dependency on NumPy. It has a binary dependency on this thing called Kiwi Solver and something called ContourPy. So I just kind of decided to try and kick the wheels, and came up in a conversation I had somewhere else around the demo that I had for Matplotlib, and I thought, I really should just check to see if I can produce recent Matplotlib wheels for 3.14. And it turns out they're actually relatively easy to generate, so I'm trying to get the dependencies, trying to get Kiwi Solver and ContourPy, get those wheels dependencies in place, so that then I can submit a pull request for the Matplotlib wheels, so that then I can submit this ongoing chain of things that are dependencies upstream. Just more generally, in sort of places you want to help, if you do want to contribute to the BeeWare ecosystem, that is a great place to help. There is a very, very long chain of dependencies. Everything on PyPI that has a binary is potentially a candidate to be submitted upstream. And in a lot of cases, it is a relatively straightforward configuration. If they are using CI build wheel, it is usually just adding the extra line to run CI build wheel, and it will usually do the right thing. If you want any more details, yell out on the Discord, and I'm happy to point you in the direction of what needs to be done there. I think also Malcolm Smith is speaking at EuroPython next week, I think, about this general topic, and I gave a talk at PyCon Australia last year about that general topic as well. I think next up is Charles.
Yeah, my phone is telling me my battery is low, so hopefully it doesn't cut me off.
Okay, so
how's that for timing?
Yeah. So there were the Canvas improvements, as mentioned, and increasing layout efficiency by calculating once per even loop, still in progress. Next up is John. Hold on, John, we can't hear you. Nope.
Hi?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, for the first time in forever. So, last month I talked about Russ and we designed a new scaffold layer for implementing top-level application navigation features. Sorry, it just feels good to say application navigation. And the implementation of that has been started. I got a core API contract for base scaffolds done. It's all boring by this point. It's basically trying to have our existing content structure fit into the new system. But after this finishes, it's gonna be very fast. And by the way, there's still web and textual to update. I gotta familiarize myself with these two platforms. And then I also found and fixed some small bugs here and there in BeeWare. And for system pass 6 integration Toga, I remember Russ mentioning this, though. The reason we need to install through system package repositories is because only system package repositories can integrate properly with the themes installed on the system. So that's why we needed a shim to import it into the virtual environment. And I also learned about Toga's third-party widget system introduced by Corin. And yeah, I used it to implement a small feature I needed for my app, which I'll mention later. In my personal component library, I just started drawn ZHOU 721/Toga X-Frost, and I've also proposed the feature needed upstream. I also learned some actual Toga features as well, like the canvas widget and the file dialogs. So I developed my was not John ZHOU721/Taller file and then an R based on this. So basically it allows you to put an image in and output a like by default letter-sized page with like multiple copies of that image, and you can specify paddings or something like that. So that way, if you want to print your like say business card or something like a pass or like a free lunch passes for an event, it's just really easy. You can just import, change some numbers, and click, and then you're done. And finally, I guess the best part of Windows, I debugged some DPI scaling issues on Windows Forms. So I was being sarcastic, FYI. And to be honest, it was mostly just guesswork. Or as Raymond Chan, like the famous Microsoft engineer says, psychic debugging. But basically something's going on with the DPI scaling. There seems to be some undocumented like magic going on behind Win32 with fonts, and it seems to happen in a way that conflicts with what we do, like in terms of scaling fonts like manually in Toga. But and yeah, I was about to submit a candidate PR, but then somehow there's more issues with Windows as I gotta phase out. Oh yeah, I love Windows. Windows is the best operating system ever. From
It is a perfectly fine operating system. A lot of people use it happily, but yes, this is the DPI. The way that Windows handles DPI is very, very interesting. And
yeah,
yes, John's help on this has been invaluable. It is a weird situation that only
thanks.
comes up if you have multiple monitors with different DPIs, which is entirely possible. And then you move a window from one to the other. What DPI is it when it's halfway in between one and the other, and when does it switch, and does it remember that it switched? And we've got the bug that's been reported is if you move the window kind of back and forth, it ends up like just continually getting bigger and bigger and bigger because it keeps readjusting what its
Yeah,
baseline DPI is. And anyway, it's a mess, and it's you've been doing good work with that one, John.
thanks, Microsoft.
All right. Next up is Luis.
I just have a quick update on a PR I mentioned last month. I submitted what I believe is the last and final revision. The PR adds 2 new steps to the Android emulator creation wizard. After naming your emulator, the first new step is that you'll be prompted to choose an Android API level. And then the next new step would be selecting an image tag associated with that level. This could give users more control. For example, if they need Google Play services or want to test against a specific API level, they'll be able to do so. So you'll now get like a list of API levels to choose from when creating an Android emulator, and it will be compatible with your architecture.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And that's Waggle Dance time. Last but not least, it's down the bee burrow. Rabbits aren't the only animals that burrow. Some bees do as well. Time to dig deeper into topics that have got the hive a-buzzing. Russell, I see you have a question.
I was sort of more a question for the putting this into the audience. BeeWare has a long history of producing merch that people seem to like. We have the bee stickers, which oh gosh, have I actually got one sitting here? I do have one sitting right here. There we go. The bee stickers are floating around, and like as soon as I put them down on a table, they disappear very, very rapidly. Over the last couple of years, I've also been handing out bee pins to anybody who wants them. Many years ago, there was actually not a bee shirt. There was a Brutus shirt. So there was a yak shirt that had a big the Tiberius the yak with bigger yaks have bigger yaks have littler yaks upon their backs to bite them, and littler yaks have little yaks, and so on ad infinitum, written in the circle around the outside. With very limited print run. But sorry, the other one is I many years ago did a mock-up of the X-Files style I Want to Believe poster, but with a big floating Brutus in the middle of it with Believe written underneath. So yes, I like my merch, and of course there's the obligatory, and this is not a coin check, the obligatory challenge coin, which everybody knows and loves. From my days in the Django ecosystem, I learnt that strategically placed limited edition merch is a wonderful way to raise money for an organization. And besides, I just like nice shirts. And so I guess I wanted to throw out to the community, what would you like to see? What would you like to see, or what form would you like that merch to take? What topics of interest would make good merch that you would hand over your fine money for?
So Jesse has opinions. It would be I want a Brutus t-shirt, and then the rest is all caps following your Yak t-shirt description is, I love that so much. Where do I get it? Bring back the Yak shirt. So there's one bit of feedback.
I have strong opinions about a lot of things, but this is in the top 10 for the week, so thanks.
Oh.
John, do you have thoughts, or were you just waving?
Yeah, I think just I'm not sure, since we're building GUIs like a very weirdly scaled and blurry like Windows window with a yak on it, or with like a very low resolution and like tiny like yak on like corners with like blurry text saying Toga.
Sounds like
I've done mock-ups at various times of like the I want to believe being sort of the stimulus point. I've done mock-ups of a number of other sort of media tie-ins. I've had a Wallace and Gromit with the bees, and there's another one of the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The sort of the image of John Raoul looking back over the back of his convertible, saying, "We can't stop here. This is Yak country." Yeah. So I guess we got beware the Ides of March or the Ides of Merch.
Oh, actually, sorry if this is like a side quest, but Russell, why is it called BeeWare?
It literally is the IDEs of Python. So it's on the coin. BeeWare the Ides of Python. The going way back, the very, very first thing that even remotely looked like BeeWare came out of me giving a talk at PyCon Australia 2013, where I extolled the virtues of tkinter as a much maligned GUI framework. And announced the very, very first part of what became the BeeWare suite, which was Cricket, which is a test runner. So, test Cricket takes a long time to play, test suites take a long time to run. And the grand plan was that, Cricket was a test runner. It was a tool that did one thing and did one thing well. What it did was display the output of a test suite. And the grand plan was to produce a debugger, boodja, and to produce a coverage tool, Duvet, and to produce a documentation editing tool called Galley, and et cetera, et cetera. There was a whole suite of things I was going to build, all of which did one thing and did one thing well. And the original intention was to do them all with tkinter, and then I got about 2 months into that project. I had Cricket working, and Cricket was working well in tkinter. Then I discovered the edges of tkinter. tkinter does not have a web widget. It does not have a rich text widget. It has a code widget, but only barely. And so I fell into a hole where I said, well, how hard could it be to write your own GUI toolkit? Yeah, okay.
13 years later.
13 years later, yeah. But anyway, the original gag was that BeeWare was the IDEs of Python. Hence, I do enjoy a good pun, and the Ides of March, the Ides of Python, hence that where it goes. So,
I would like to point out that the original website for every project had its own input separate from everything else, where you would describe what the pun was. I want to make that clear. We don't have that now because we don't describe all 15 tools, but you had to fill that in if you were going to add a project.
Yes, it was Yes, a lot of puns. There are still some puns in there, and
Where
little
does that
secret,
live now? Where I want to see the old
web archive,
yeah, the
archive.org.
retro.
You could build it, you know,
Hey,
go back and
hold
build
on. I think
branch.
there might be a place you can find it in every documentation. So go to toga.beware.org, for example, for Toga, and then the last row is about Toga and frequently asked questions, and you get why the name Toga. We all know the amorphism that when in Rome, do as Romans do. So what is a well-dressed Roman wear? A toga, of course, and so on.
Yeah, no, we're talking about the original projects.
The actual
that don't-
website,
that don't have they don't have web, documentation, so none of the puns are available anymore. No worries.
Sorry, I thought
there was a.
I thought after
Yeah.
like the title of our organization, the docs are also part of the website, but y'all were referring to the main BeeWare.org. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was also a lot of other projects that were previously listed on the website. We've kind of not removed them, but sort of downscaled them. Like things like cricket. Like I still very much would like to get working on cricket at some point, and all I've got to do is find the extra 15 hours in the day to do that. So yes, but yes, on the merch, like t-shirts are an obvious one. Producing a limited edition t-shirt. I've also I find myself my favorite hoodie has developed a hole, and so I need a new hoodie. So therefore, I need to do a merch run so that I can get a new hoodie.
Yes. So feel free
any other requested forms? Yes.
Yeah, feel free to post on the Discord. You can also find us on social media and let us know what you think, what you're interested in. And that is Down the Bee Burrow. And with that, it's time to wrap up. This has been The Buzz Live. You can find us chatting all month long on the BeeWare Discord. If you're not already a member, you can join at beeware.org/BEE/chat. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next month.